Imagine this. Two brothers receive the same inheritance from their father. Both have legitimate claims, both have ancient documents proving their rights. Both are willing to die for what they believe is rightfully theirs. Now imagine that inheritance isn't money or property, it's an entire homeland, and those two brothers? Their descendants have been fighting over it for nearly 4,000 years. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you think you know about one of the world's most explosive conflicts. Because this isn't just about politics, territory, or even religion. This is about a promise made by God Himself. A promise that has shaped the destiny of nations and may very well determine the fate of our world. Stick with me for the next 15 minutes, and I'll take you on a journey through time that connects ancient biblical prophecies to today's headlines in ways that will absolutely blow your mind. Let's go back to where it all began, roughly 4,000 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia. Picture this scene. An elderly man named Abraham receives a message that would echo through millennia. God tells him to leave everything he knows and travel to a land that would belong to his descendants forever. Not for a generation, not for a century, but as an everlasting possession. Here's where the story gets fascinating and complicated. Abraham has two sons, Ishmael, born to Hagar, an Egyptian servant, and Isaac, born later to his wife Sarah. Both boys receive blessings from God, but there's a crucial difference. God's covenant, that eternal promise of land, passes through Isaac's line. Isaac becomes the father of Jacob, whose descendants become the Israelites. Meanwhile, Ishmael becomes the father of what tradition tells us are the Arab nations, including the Palestinians. Pause and think about this for a moment. We're talking about a family dispute that began before the pyramids were built, before Moses parted the Red Sea, before Jesus walked the earth, and it's still making headlines today. But here's what makes this absolutely mind-blowing: the land God promised Abraham. It's the exact same territory that Israel and Palestine are fighting over right now. Fast forward through centuries of biblical history, the Israelites build their nation, establish Jerusalem as their capital, construct Solomon's temple. Then comes 70 AD, the year that changed everything. The Romans destroy Jerusalem, the temple burns, the Jewish people are scattered across the globe in what becomes known as the diaspora, a 2,000-year exile that seemed to make God's promises impossible to fulfill. For nearly 2 millennia, Jews around the world faced persecution, pogroms, and ultimately the Holocaust. 6 million murdered simply for being Jewish. But here's what's remarkable. Throughout all of this, they never forgot the promise. Every Passover ended with "next year in Jerusalem." Every prayer included a plea for return. Meanwhile, other peoples settled in the land. Palestinians, many tracing their lineage back thousands of years, built communities, raised families, and developed deep roots in the same soil. Two peoples, one land, both with legitimate historical claims. Can you see how this was destined to explode? Now comes the most pivotal year in modern Middle Eastern history, 1948. For Jews, it was nothing short of miraculous. After 2,000 years of exile, Israel was reborn as a nation on May 14, 1948. Ancient prophecies from Ezekiel about dry bones coming to life seemed to be fulfilling before the world's eyes. But here's the other side of that same coin. For Palestinians, 1948 wasn't a miracle. It was the Nakba, the catastrophe. Over 700,000 Palestinians were displaced from their homes. Entire villages disappeared. Families were scattered to refugee camps where their descendants still live today. Think about the psychological impact of this. Jews saw divine prophecy being fulfilled. Palestinians saw their world destroyed. Both narratives are true, both are heartbreaking, and both continue to fuel this conflict. The very day Israel declared independence, 5 Arab armies attacked. The newborn nation wasn't just fighting for territory, it was fighting for survival. Against all odds, Israel won, but the victory came at an enormous cost that we're still paying today. Just when you think this story couldn't get more dramatic, we come to June 1967. In just 6 days, yes, 6 days, Israel went from being surrounded by hostile armies to controlling the West Bank, Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. They tripled their territory in less than a week. For the first time in 2,000 years, Jews could pray at the Western Wall. Jerusalem was reunited under Israeli control. Many saw this as the final piece of prophetic fulfillment. But here's the devastating consequence. Over 1 million Palestinians suddenly found themselves living under Israeli military occupation. This wasn't temporary, it's been going on for over 55 years now. The Six-Day War created the reality we live with today: Israeli settlements in the West Bank, the siege of Gaza, the ongoing dispute over Jerusalem's status. Every major issue in today's conflict traces back to those 6 days in 1967. Now here's where this gets really interesting and controversial. Many Christians and Jews don't see this conflict as merely political. They view it as spiritual warfare on a cosmic scale. According to this perspective, the battle for Israel and Jerusalem isn't just about nationalism or territory. It's about God's ultimate plan for humanity. Consider these biblical prophecies. Zechariah predicted that Jerusalem would become a cup of trembling for all nations. Ezekiel spoke of Israel being regathered from the nations after a long exile. Jesus himself said that Jerusalem would be trodden down by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. For believers in biblical prophecy, every news report about Israeli-Palestinian conflict isn't just current events, it's the unfolding of ancient predictions about the end times. The establishment of Israel in 1948, fulfillment of Ezekiel's dry bones vision, the capture of Jerusalem in 1967, the end of Gentile control Jesus prophesied about, the ongoing conflicts, signs that we're approaching what the Bible calls the time of Jacob's trouble, and ultimately, the return of Christ. Let's zoom in on Jerusalem, because this city is absolutely central to understanding why this conflict seems unsolvable. For Jews, Jerusalem is the city where Abraham nearly sacrificed Isaac, where David established his kingdom, where Solomon built the temple, where God's presence dwelt among his people. It's mentioned over 800 times in the Hebrew Bible. For Christians, Jerusalem is where Jesus was crucified and resurrected, making it the spiritual center of their faith. For Muslims, Jerusalem houses the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, the third holiest site in Islam, where they believe Muhammad ascended to heaven. Now imagine trying to negotiate over a city that 3 major religions consider absolutely sacred. That's like trying to divide someone's beating heart. Every compromise feels like blasphemy to someone. The Bible actually predicted this would happen. Zechariah prophesied that in the last days all nations would gather against Jerusalem and it would become an immovable rock that would injure anyone who tried to move it. Sound familiar? That's exactly what we see today. But let's not lose sight of the human element in all of this prophetic drama. Real people are living with the consequences of these ancient promises and modern conflicts. Palestinian children growing up in refugee camps, knowing their grandparents' stories of villages that no longer exist. Israeli families living with the constant threat of rocket attacks and terrorism. Both sides have compelling narratives. Israelis can point to thousands of years of persecution, culminating in the Holocaust, and say, "We need a homeland where we can be safe." Palestinians can point to their displacement and ongoing occupation and say, "This was our home too. What about our rights?" The tragedy is that both narratives are true. Both peoples have legitimate claims, both have suffered enormously, and both deserve security and dignity. Here's what makes this conflict so unique and so important to understand. Many believe we're not just witnessing a regional dispute, but the final chapters of human history as we know it. Biblical prophecy speaks of Jerusalem being the center of end-times events. The Battle of Armageddon, the return of Christ, the establishment of God's kingdom on earth. All of these are connected to what happens in this tiny piece of land that's smaller than New Jersey. Some key prophetic markers that believers are watching. The return of Jews to their homeland, fulfilled in 1948. The recapture of Jerusalem, fulfilled in 1967. The rebuilding of the temple, this hasn't happened yet, but plans exist. All nations turning against Israel, we may be seeing this unfold now. Whether you believe in biblical prophecy or not, you can't deny that this small conflict has captured the world's attention in a way that's completely disproportionate to the size of the territory involved. The Israel-Palestine conflict isn't happening in a vacuum. It's become a proxy for larger global tensions. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union backed Arab states while America supported Israel. Today, Iran funds Hamas and Hezbollah while the US provides billions in military aid to Israel. Russia, China, and European nations all have their own interests and agendas. Every peace proposal has failed because the stakes are so much higher than just two peoples negotiating over land. This conflict touches on religious fundamentalism versus secularism, East versus West civilization tensions, oil and energy politics, nuclear proliferation concerns, global terrorism and security. When you realize that decisions made in this conflict could trigger regional wars, affect global oil supplies, or even lead to nuclear confrontation, you begin to understand why world powers can't just let Israel and Palestine sort it out themselves. You might be wondering, why should I care about this ancient conflict halfway around the world? Here's why. The Israel-Palestine conflict is like a lens that reveals the deepest tensions of our time. It's where religion meets politics, where ancient promises collide with modern realities, where the past refuses to stay buried. Understanding this conflict helps you understand why the Middle East is so unstable, how religious beliefs shape international relations, why terrorism exists and how it spreads, what drives both nationalism and globalization, how historical trauma affects entire peoples for generations. Plus, if you believe biblical prophecy, what happens in Israel and Palestine may determine the fate of the entire world. So, let me bring you back to where we started. Is the Israel-Palestine conflict primarily a spiritual war, or is it a political struggle? After everything we've explored, the ancient promises, the modern displacements, the prophetic implications, the human suffering, I think the answer is clear: it's both. You cannot understand this conflict purely through a political lens because it involves promises that believers say came directly from God. But you also cannot understand it purely through a spiritual lens because real people are living and dying based on very earthly concerns about security, sovereignty, and survival. The biblical prophecies may be unfolding exactly as predicted. The geopolitical complexities may make peace impossible through human effort alone, but what's certain is this: the story that began with Abraham 4,000 years ago is still being written today, and whether you see it as the fulfillment of ancient prophecy or simply as one of history's most intractable conflicts, the Israel-Palestine dispute will continue to shape our world in ways we're only beginning to understand. The question isn't whether this conflict will be resolved. The question is how, and what that resolution will mean for the rest of us. What do you think? Are we witnessing the unfolding of biblical prophecy, or are we simply seeing the tragic consequences of competing nationalisms and religious fundamentalism? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the connections between ancient prophecies and modern headlines. Because if there's one thing we can all agree on, it's that this story is far from over.